After 8 days, 6 countries, and scores of photo ops, President Obama's first overseas trip has officially come to an end, harvesting untold air miles, goodwill, and, of course, fascination for his wife. On this final day, the President heralded a new chapter of American engagement with the world. Now comes the tough part of turning that rhetoric into reality. Washington correspondent Katie Kay begins our look back at what was accomplished on the trip and what wasn't.
Arriving for the G20 summit in London, Michelle and Barack were the only show in town. He impressed the Prime Minister, she wowed the Queen. It was a great debut and a new American tone.
We exercise our leadership best when we are listening, when we recognize that the world is a complicated place and that we are going to have to act in partnership with other countries.
They loved it in London, though he left with no global stimulus, and they loved it in Strasbourg. The NATO summit was a little overshadowed by the first ladies of fashion and a lot overshadowed by Obama's town hall and a dose of realism to French and German students.
We cannot pretend somehow that because Barack Hussein Obama got elected as president, suddenly everything's going to be okay.
Europe's leaders agreed, but what did they actually give for the war in Afghanistan? Not much. A quick trip to Germany didn't produce German boots for the front lines against the Taliban. Then it was on to Prague, and before 20,000 people, this ambitious president proclaimed a vision of a world free of nuclear weapons.
We, too, must ignore the voices who tell us that the world cannot change.
But North Korea chose that same day to lift its voice and its rocket and ruined the party. Next stop, Turkey, where he addressed the Turkish parliament and the Muslim world with a message of friendship.
We will listen carefully, we will bridge misunderstandings, and we will seek common ground.
Barack Obama went to Europe and won respect. What else he won is less clear.
Well, in summing up the President's travels, White House Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel declared today that America is back. But can that really be accomplished in just one trip? And what are the tangible results from the series of meetings? Well, Katie is here to help us assess it, along with Times Assistant Managing Editor Mike Duffy. Great to see you both. So, lots of love on this trip, lots of photo ops. But what was his biggest get and what was his biggest give? First to you, Mike.
I think it's sort of all the same. He, more than anything else, reset American foreign policy after 8 years in which Washington dictated to its friends as well as its enemies how it ought to behave. This time the president went to listen, and he, in a way that was both a give and a get. He both gave Europe a chance to say, hey, we're here to listen to you, and in doing so, he changed the fundamental relationship between the two groups.
Katie, what do you think?
I'd say there were also some quite specifics. I think he got a good meeting with President Medvedev of Russia. It's now so long ago and so many countries ago and so many events ago that we've almost forgotten it. But there was that key meeting early on with Medvedev, and you think of how important Russia is to so many of America's concerns around the world: Iran, Afghanistan, nuclear missiles, Eastern Europe. To get the Russian and the American relationship back on track is very important. I think he gave two big things, and that was the stimulus. He didn't get 2% of global GDP as a stimulus package, and he didn't get as much as he would have liked on Afghanistan. But there's a caveat there, Matt, which is that they went to Europe knowing that they would get neither of those things.
Okay, so there's all this love and there's all this respect, and America is back on track and all the rest of it. But if he didn't manage to translate that goodwill into troops on the ground in Afghanistan now, what makes you think he might do so at the end of the year, Mike?
I don't think he will. I think the best he can hope for at any time from NATO is continued support, help with things that have to do with logistics that don't have to do with combat. He's really done getting help from NATO, I think, in Afghanistan. He might get some money. What he was giving to NATO was a different tone and a different posture, a different future. You know, it was just 2 years ago that George W. Bush went to Prague and said, I'm going to build a missile defense shield in your country. And 60% of the Czech Republic people hated it. Obama goes there and says, that's done. We're going to try to get rid of all nuclear weapons. It's such a fundamental, radical shift in America's posture, its direction, its vector in the world, that he was doing things that really no NATO country really expected to come. So in some ways, some of the stuff that happened will pay off long term here in ways we don't know yet.
Katie, I mean, the interesting poll out today, I mean, let's talk about the response here in the US. A New York Times CBS poll saying that people in this country feel marginally, I quote, marginally better about the economy and the direction of the country Is that as a result of this trip? Could it have been a bounce?
Well, the poll was taken as Obama was travelling around Europe, and to some extent I do believe that Americans want to be liked by the world. They didn't like that period of intense anti-American sentiment around the world under George Bush, and they have seen the reaction that Obama, and let's not understate her impact, Michelle Obama as well in Europe has had, and the response that Europeans had to America, and I think they liked it. But I think there's also been, that poll was taken as the stock market was having a rally last week, and there is some sense, and there has been talked up by the administration, that there may be green shoots, that we may have reached the bottom of the unemployment numbers, and I think you're getting two factors, really. You're getting what happened here in America last week, and you're getting Obama's trip abroad.
Let's quickly have a look at a cartoon which came out today, I believe, which is Barack Obama trailing a sort of mantle of the American flag, and basically everyone, including, of course, very visibly Gordon Brown, hiding underneath it, feeling wonderful about themselves and about America. So let me ask you, as the only genuine American in this room, Mike Duffy, do Americans care whether the rest of the world likes them or not?
Oh, yeah, I would go further than Catty said. I'd say we don't only kind of want to be liked, we desperately want to be liked.
Is that really true?
Yeah, I think it is true.
But that's you, Mike. What about people around?
Oh, okay, fine. Right. It's a majority of what Americans in the room. But I think particularly among people who voted for Barack Obama, this was an important piece of what they wanted to restore when they put a Democrat back in the White House, was an end to a time when Americans really, and American foreign policy in Washington was not loved overseas. They wanted that over. Obama went a long way this week toward ending it, not just in all the speeches you mentioned, but also in that speech to the Turkish parliament. So I think that was a big thing he checked off.
Have we just seen the birth of the Obama doctrine, which is the doctrine of a humbler, more listening America that realizes it can't do it alone, it has to do it with its friends? Genuinely, Catty?
Yeah, I think we have. I mean, this was a guy who said everything that Europeans could ever have wanted him to say on this trip.
But it kind of rings true in this country as well,
and
doesn't
I think
it, to many
it does
people?
ring true in this country, particularly as it follows on from 8 years in which Americans didn't feel that they were liked around the world. I think there's still going to be questions about whether he actually manages to translate this, and I think it's one of the most fascinating things about Obama abroad, is whether he can translate that into concrete results. And I think some of that is going to depend on what happens in the future, and we can't tell that yet.
Okay, so let's bring everything crashing down to earth again. He's going to land anytime soon here. Right. He's got General Motors facing bankruptcy, Chrysler facing bankruptcy, a fight on Capitol Hill about the budget. He's got an in-tray full of headaches. Can he manage them?
He's probably really unhappy to put foreign policy aside because it's so much more fun than domestic policy. But one of the reasons he was successful overseas is because Americans know that they can't do it all anymore. Their economy is in trouble. We're limited in our resources. And in some ways, the problems that we have at home and he must face is one of the reasons he was able to go overseas and say, we need your help.
Okay, finally, marks out of 10, Obama presidency so far, domestic and foreign. Mike, you first, then Cathy.
Well, 7.5 to 8 on foreign, but it has been. We only have 8 days. Domestically, he's working at 5.5 to 6. Set a huge bar for himself. Long way to go.
Cathy?
God, I would always agree with exactly what Mike Duffy says. Why criticise him? 8 and 5.
8 and 5. There we go. 8 and 5. Thank God I don't have to ask myself. Okay, thank you very much, Cathy Kay, Mike Duffy. Thanks for coming in.